Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in fear, not knowing what the next minute might bring? Imagine being Abu Samo, a Gaza resident, who along with his family and a staggering 123,000 others, has been internally displaced due to the ongoing war. This unsettling reality began with surprise attacks by Hamas, leading to hundreds of civilian casualties. In response, Israel launched counterattacks, resulting in an even higher number of deaths. To provide a perspective, over 900 Israeli citizens have lost their lives, and retaliatory attacks have claimed the lives of at least 687 people in Gaza. The fear is palpable. Picture this: Samo and his family had to flee their home in the Ramal area of Gaza City, seeking refuge at a hospital. But safety was short-lived as they were forced to flee yet again due to an impending strike. Their current shelter, a temporary hotel room. But even there, the fear of ongoing attacks remains. And it's not just the fear of attacks. Israel has imposed a complete siege on Gaza, cutting off essential resources like food, water, fuel, and electricity. The already unreliable power and communication lines have further deteriorated, leaving local journalists struggling to inform citizens. The territory of Gaza, under Hamas control since 2007, is grappling with numerous challenges. Limited resources, rampant poverty, and high unemployment rates are just a few of the hardships faced by the residents. People like Abu Samo aren't insurgents or fighters. They are ordinary residents who yearn for a peaceful and normal life. Imagine their despair as they hear from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that these airstrikes are just the beginning. Living in constant fear and uncertainty, the residents of Gaza can only hope for a ceasefire. Their lives hang in a balance that's heavily tilted towards fear and despair, away from peace and normalcy. This is the unsettling reality of Gaza. What happens when a government decides to retaliate with a scorched earth policy? This question is not merely rhetorical. It is a grim reality that we are witnessing in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The Israeli government, in response to Hamas's surprise attacks, decided to implement their own scorched earth policy. This policy is as destructive as it sounds. It involves the deliberate and systematic annihilation of anything that might be useful to the enemy. In this case, the Israeli government has closed its borders with Gaza, cutting off essential supplies of food, water, and electricity. When we look at the impact of this policy on the people of Gaza, the picture is devastating. Imagine being in a place where you don't know when your next meal will come from, or how you'll quench your thirst. Imagine living in constant fear of airstrikes, with the lights flickering, the power unreliable, and communication with the outside world almost impossible. But this is not just about the physical damage. It's also about the flagrant violations of international law. The laws of war prohibit actions that cause unnecessary suffering or hardship, like starvation and the targeting of civilians. Yet these laws seem to have been disregarded. Even the Israeli Defense Force's own code of conduct, which emphasizes the preservation of human life, appears to have been cast aside. The objective of this campaign appears less about ensuring Israel's security and more about retribution. It's a painful reminder that in war, it's often the civilians who suffer the most. The actions of the Israeli government have displaced thousands of civilians, leaving many without basic necessities. The actions of the Israeli government have raised serious questions about the disregard of human rights in war situations. This is not just a conflict between two parties. It's a humanitarian crisis that demands our attention and action. What is the world's response to these blatant violations of international law and human rights? This is a question that has been echoing around the globe as the war in Gaza continues to unfold. The international community, particularly powerful entities like the United States and Europe, has been noticeably quiet. Despite the clear evidence of war crimes and violations of human rights, there has been a lack of significant action to address these issues. This silence is not only deafening but also deeply troubling. This isn't the first time that the world has turned a blind eye to such atrocities. In 2022, for instance, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia saw the open commission of war crimes with little to no repercussions on a global scale. Similarly, the rhetoric and policies of former U.S. President Donald Trump, who openly endorsed war crimes, were met with a lackluster response from the international community. These instances, along with the current crisis in Gaza, highlight a concerning trend, a pattern of inaction and indifference towards the violation of international laws and human rights. The silence of the world in response to these violations sends a chilling message. It suggests that powerful nations can act with impunity, that they can disregard international law without facing significant consequences. This not only undermines the very fabric of international law, but also threatens the basic human rights that we all hold dear. The situation in Gaza is a stark reminder of the limitations of international law when it comes to the protection of human rights. Despite the existence of stringent laws and conventions designed to safeguard these rights, their enforcement often falls short. So what does this say about our world? It raises uncomfortable questions about the value we place on human life, about our commitment to upholding justice and fairness. It forces us to confront the grim reality that international law, in its current form, may not be enough to protect the most vulnerable among us. The silence of the international community raises questions about the effectiveness of international law in protecting human rights. It's a sobering thought, one that challenges us to reflect on our collective responsibility towards the preservation of human dignity and justice. As we reflect on the events of the war in Gaza, we must ask ourselves, what can be done to prevent such atrocities in the future? Looking back on what we've discussed, we've seen the unsettling reality of the situation in Gaza. The residents, like Abu Samo and his family, are the ones who bear the brunt of the conflict, facing displacement and living in constant fear of what each minute may bring. With the imposition of a complete siege on Gaza, the basic necessities of life, food, water, power, have become scarce commodities. The Israeli government's scorched earth policy has brought about further devastation, with accusations of violations of international law. The policy of causing damage rather than accuracy, of retribution against civilians, is a stark deviation from the preservation of human life. The world has watched as these actions have displaced thousands of civilians and left many without access to basic needs. Yet the world's response has been limited. While the actions of the Israeli government have drawn comparisons to the rhetoric of former U.S. President Donald Trump and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022, significant action to address these violations of international law has been lacking. So, what can we do? As observers of these events, we must recognize the need for a more effective international response to war crimes and human rights violations. We must encourage our leaders to take decisive action against such atrocities. Staying informed about the situation is crucial. It is through understanding that we can begin to empathize with those affected and rally support for efforts to bring about peace and justice. Let us not forget the residents of Gaza, people like Abu Samo who merely desire a peaceful and normal life. Let's use the information we have at our disposal to raise awareness about the situation in Gaza. Talk about it. Share articles, use social media platforms to spread the word. Our collective voice can make a difference. Remember, staying informed and raising awareness are the first steps towards creating a world where human rights are respected, even in times of war.